Hello, I'm Catherine Brown Ramsperger, author of the award-winning The Shores of Our Souls. You can call me Kathy. Welcome to my Story Hour. I created Story Hour to connect readers and writers, and I'm so pleased you're listening. Today we welcome gifted poet Lesley Clinton, who has just released her first chapbook of poetry. Lesley, congratulations and welcome. You must be overjoyed seeing your book come to fruition.
Thank you. I am, absolutely.
So Lesley is a board member of the Catholic Literary Arts. She's won awards from the Poetry Society of Texas and Press Women of Texas. She's been a juried poet at the Houston Poetry Fest 3 times, and in 2019 received the Lucille Johnson Clark Memorial Award. Lesley teaches at Strake Jesuit College Preparatory. My son went to a Jesuit school, so I should be able to pronounce Jesuit. Her chapbooks of poems, Calling the Garden from the Grave, is now available for pre-order from Finishing Line Press. She's been featured in numerous literary journals, and you can find a list of them at Lesley Clinton, that's Lesley, Clinton, like the president, CLINTON.com. She's also a mom of 3 and a writing mom like me. So I'm so pleased to welcome Lesley. I would love for you to read a couple of your favorite poems from your book. I just wanted to say I particularly enjoyed Hero's Homecoming, Discernment, and Rothko paints the central triptych, but you have your favorites, and I would love for you to read 1 or 2.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited about the 3 poems that you mentioned because I find that people don't always request those particular pieces, but I think they are central to what I write, who I am as a writer, and how I see the writing process and the calling to write. So I am delighted to share those with you. And I'll start with the poem called Discernment. You led by following. Now I see. I sought dead ends. You threw down your coat, and I tramped on, unmuddied. You deferred, mannered by some foresight of the way, its rise from the muck, its roots muscling up from the dirt. Left to my own myopia, tiny empires puddling in my footprint, I'd still be stuck carving at limestone, hands red as a glistening heart, mad to make it, failure on failure, up some bleak cliff that likely neither exists nor ends. So that was the first one. And the next one that I'm going to share with you is Hero's Homecoming. Mythology tells us that Aphrodite's priestess Hero followed her lover to a watery death. Though it's told she drowned herself, here she sits, salt in her hair, eyes sun-strained, frame in exhale, at the old table alone. Palms face down, she finds the planks smoother now, each knot somehow familiar and unforeseen. Damp lung burn turns to purpose. It feels like first breath, this turn, a trembling relief of firsts, with the flushed oxygen surge of mission sweeping in on the waves' roar, where once blew in glamour with a sailor's ease, while Hero, soft as a tongue of fire kept in a lantern, hovered slight at the window. And the last one is called Rothko paints the central triptych. And this is written about a triptych of 3 artworks in the Rothko Chapel in Houston, which is right near the University of St. Thomas, where I went to college, got my bachelor's degree. And when you go into this chapel, you walk in, and these paintings, they're abstract paintings, and you really, it's dark in there, and you can't see. They just look almost like, just kind of like black rectangles, until you sit for a while and your eyes adjust to the light, or the level of light, and suddenly you start to see all of this nuance and all of these levels and layers, and you can really start to reflect on what the colors are saying, and spend some quiet reflective time in that chapel. So this is called Rothko Paints the Central Triptych.
This is my favorite.
I sieve lost whispers from history's throat, wide, prescient gifts we have eyes to hear. The wearing of stone, geese darkening stars, the dust of us sifting, dew starred at our feet, the frosted breath of our calling. Mine's the old wildflower wind that has tangled the hair of seekers from all generations and borne their yearnings like dandelion seeds, bound for soil or stone. I mean to take part in the visceral blare of moment, to sing with mute pigments to my vacancy and yours lurking too, the first of all songs, in language that can't grow stale or go lost. For this, I still redden each abyss a tinge. And those are the 3.
So they're gorgeous, and we talked just slightly about how the last one is a bit like the writer's journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I fell in love with it. But your voice is evocative, and your phrasing rhythmic, and you talk about the things that matter to women today, at least as far as I can tell. I wrote a poem which is not anywhere near yours. I've tried to get it published, but I can't. But it means a lot to me, called Venus Rising. So it's very similar to Hero. Yeah. So can you tell us a little about your new release, and how did you come up with that gorgeous title?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, this is a chapbook, so that means that it's a shorter collection of poems. It's not a full length, so it's kind of like you might call it a sampler. But even though that may be the case, these poems took years to come together, right? This is years of work, taken and, crafted down to the level of letter line, years of work to pull together these poems and craft them into some sort of narrative arc, right? Some sort of reflection on the two elements of that title, are the calling and then the guard, well, 3 elements: the calling, the garden, the grave. And the line itself, or the title itself, comes from the last line of the last poem, which I know is kind of unusual to take the very last line of the whole collection and use it to create the title. But this was suggested by an editor friend who saw the whole collection and said, "This is your story. You've said it here in this line." So a mentor poet, an editor friend of mine named Sarah Cortez. So she's the one who spotted it.
I love her work.
And her editing and feedback is it's just treasure. It's priceless. And it's really helped me craft this in a way that, that tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And so the calling is, you know, our calling on many different levels. Of course, the garden is the kind of the fruit or the unexpected beauty that arises out of the grave, you know, which could be looked at as, you know, suffering. It's a story, it's a redemptive message of no matter how bad things seem or how hopeless, if we look at our calling and have the courage to do what we feel that we're called to do, use our gifts and talents, or, you know, for others in the world, miraculous things can happen, miraculous results that are beautiful.
Well, I love that poem as well, and everyone, it's a gorgeous poem. I I also felt in terms of the cycle of life,
Mm-hmm.
and how we go from birth to grave, and then it starts over again, and the legacy. I loved it. I loved the symbolism in it as well. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to hear the reason behind a title, especially. And I know our audience will appreciate that as well. So, Kim Bridgeford, editor of Mezzo, is it Mezzo Common?
Mezzo common. Sound,
Okay.
yeah, that's how I've always
Says,
said it.
yeah, me too. I'm glad. Says your book is one of paradoxes and wishes with range and surprise. Do you contrast often in your poetry, and why?
Yeah, that quote from Kim Bridgeford is really meaningful to me because, you know, she recently passed away from cancer, and her support of my work and of this book, it was so generous. And these words that she said, I'm going to carry these with me as a treasure.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so yes, I use contrast so much, and you can see it. I guess if we look at the stories that are meaningful to us as human beings, at the root is some conflict, right? Something we want that we're working towards. There's always a tension and a pulling of two different things against each other. So contrast is in our central storytelling, that the story of our human experience is, you know, either I have to grow from this thing to this thing and they're very different,
Mhm.
or I'm seeing a very, you know, something that might seem either difficult or painful or falling apart, and yet I'm seeing beauty, I'm seeing truth and reality. So, you know, we can see, and I think that's part of the garden and the grave. It's like through the suffering, right, through facing difficult things, facing down despair head on the other side of that is this absolute beauty, life, vibrancy. And so, to me, contrast is central to, again, what we look for in literature and what we yearn for.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. Life is a paradox, and I use it a lot in my work. I'm fairly certain that's why our mutual friend Johnny Bernhard likes your work and mine, because we we use it a lot, the light and the dark, and how they inform each other.
Yes. And yes, you and I were just talking about what a wonderful talent and soul Johnny Bernhard is. And
Yeah,
so she uses it too. She uses contrast.
she does. She
Her.
absolutely does. So speaking of someone else, Sarah Cortez, that you mentioned earlier, and she's founder of the Catholic Literary Arts, says you use language to show your vocation and multifaceted calling. I love the way she puts that, but then I know she has a way with words. How do you devote the divine in your work?
So I think the artist is called to, and the writer, of course, involved,
Yeah,
including that, is called to
we're
look.
all artists.
Oh, you're right, we are. So the art, we're called to look at the reality of the world, the concrete world around us, and really honor that, right? We honor what we see in the real world, but we're always looking at it at least from my worldview, from my Christian worldview, Catholic worldview, looking at it with a sacramental lens, the sacredness of things, the kind of the eternal peeking out from behind the mundane and everyday, the bigger story that isn't bound by time, it isn't bound by kind of these limitations of our material world. So I just try to look for that, and I think it's inherent in when we're looking at something. I think that if we're looking at it with those eyes, we're looking with eyes of wonder and awe. And I think I want to say it was the letter to artists by Saint Pope John Paul II who said, artists are called to look for epiphanies of beauty. Epiphanies, yes, that's right. Epiphanies of beauty, the world around us, even amidst suffering or challenges or difficulty.
There's beauty in everything, a silver lining. Some people would argue that, but it's my belief. And I want to tell you that when I was a kid, my mother had these daffodils, and I used to sit there and study them every spring and it wasn't in a scientific way, it was the beauty of them. Just take them apart with my eyes. And your poetry does that for me as well, that same kind of beauty.
Thank you.
So thank you. So what nuances do you consider when you're choosing just the right word or phrase for a poem, or anything for that matter? I know you're a careful wordsmith.
Thank you. So when I guess this is the most fun part, I think, of anything. When I'm looking for a word, the word is operating on so many levels. From the very, of course, definition, like dictionary meaning, denotation is there, but then you have all these connotations. And you think about a word that might have many different connotations that could all play into the meaning of that word. I have another poem that I didn't read today where I use the word illumination 3 times in it. It's one of the first ones in the collection. And I'm talking about illumination in the sense of, light being shed on something. So a realization, maybe the light of truth, kind of a glorious light. But I'm also talking about the, those illuminated manuscripts in the medieval,
I have 2 pages downstairs that I probably shouldn't even have, but
so beautiful, and it's such like intricate, right, intertwined, bright artwork. And so I'm
so
kind
gorgeous.
of using the illuminated artwork, and I connect it to the stitching on the kind of the boots and the denim in this dance hall where people are dancing to Tejano music, and but this kind of like the richness and the multiplicity and just the beauty. But then there's the sound. There's the sound sense, illumination and lumen. You think of lune, light, the French word, or moon, the French word for moon. You think of the kind of ooh, ah, it's this kind of, it gives you a sense of awe and a sort of soothing sound as well, and calm. And then you also have to think of the rhythm of the syllables.
That's the hard part.
Now, that particular one is not a metered poem, so it doesn't have a regular rhythm of the accented and unaccented syllables. I do have some metered poems in the collection, but even without following a strict meter, you're still listening to the rhythm.
Absolutely, because even a sentence for me has rhythm. When you set out to write, do they come to you, or do you think this is going to be a metered poem, or this is going to be a free-form poem, or
I've done a little bit.
Limerick. I'm kidding about the limerick, but it would be fun. I like to write them.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think a lot of time I have started out saying I want to write a formal poem. I want to write a sonnet. And here's my topic, and I'm gonna, do it. And it may stay that way, or I may get halfway through it and say, this isn't a sonnet. It's not meant to be, it's meant to be something else. But there have been times when I've written a poem, and maybe I've had poems that have been kind of just in my folder for years. And then suddenly I come back to them and say, I know what this one needs. This one needs to have a rhythmic, this one needs form. It needs to be formalized. So I come back and I start to mess around with it. And what the form does, like working within a meter form, it forces you to think of something unusual that you wouldn't have put there you would never put in this line a word that had da dun da dun, you know, maybe you would have been saying it in another way. And now you have to think, okay, how can I approach this in a completely different way, which is what poetry is all about. The fresh, the new, the unexpected way of saying something and making it sound familiar if it's unfamiliar, or making it sound unfamiliar if it's familiar to people.
That's really cool. Wonderful way of putting it.
I heard that somewhere. That's not mine, but I don't remember where.
It's okay. We're all in this together. So I'd like to break for just a few minutes so Kaylee can bring in some questions and comments if any are there. Welcome, Kaylee Mullis, my sidekick.
Hello, everybody. So we have a few comments and a few questions. So we have a few hellos. Johnny says, beautiful Lesley, and she says, hello. We have author Marilyn Rice. She says hello from across the pond. Shanessa also says, hi, ladies.
Hi.
We have a question from Noelle Puglisi, and she asks, do you also write without contrast as a motivation?
Ooh, that's a good one. I haven't done that consciously. That's a fantastic question. It makes me want to go tonight. That's what I'm going to, next time I have any time to draft something. I'm going to a poetry workshop tonight with Catholic Literary Arts with poet Judith Sorenberger. And I'm going to take one of the, crafting times, and I will write something that consciously does not use contrast, because I think it's natural for me to do that. And I haven't ever set out to just look at something, I don't want to say monolithic, because that's not what the question is asking, but to consciously avoid these binary opposites, right? And to just kind of explore it, one aspect of something. That's neat, exciting.
Yeah, it is an interesting, it is an interesting thought, because, I mean, without one thing, there's not the existence of the other. So it's interesting to just focus on one side of things. So good question. I agree. And then we have one from Tatiana Ramzoff, and she asks, who or what is your inspiration for your poems?
Oh, I love that question too. So, Kathy, at some point when we were talking, I don't know if it's been within this hour or not, you mentioned you're very a character-driven writer. Mm. And I think I was having a conversation with another writer recently, and I think that place might be my first, like context might be the way I enter a poem. Something hits me a certain way in an imagined or a real place, and I want to explore what it is that is making me stop and think. And so I think as a writer, that's something that I do quite often. So I use the ocean quite a bit. I use West Texas settings, and I've used some Louisiana settings as well. And I kind of get the mood and the tone. And then I ask myself, what's the story here? And why am I drawn to thinking about this and wanting to imagine that I'm in this place? And sometimes it's I have a cathedral. I have an old, one of my poems has a hakal, which is like a little kind of half in the ground sort of hut that they're in kind of Southwest Texas and Mexico, sort of historical housing structures. But I'm like, what's the story here? And traveling, you see these kind of, our old historic sites, and I'm like, what a story, and then the characters come. So I think that's how inspiration-wise, probably how I enter a poem.
Cool. That's probably why I love it too, because I love traveling, and I feel like every place has an energy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a different energy and vibe to any location on a map or any building in a city, mm-hmm. or let's not even talk about the southern houses with all the haunting ghosts. So I grew up in one. So it's that's really wonderful. I've never heard a poet say that, but I'm sure that is inspiration for a lot of them. So I think we'll go on with a few more of my questions now. So in your review, your wonderful review of Paul Mariani's work, you say, we are used to thinking of poets in terms of their creative gifts, impact, and style, but we don't consider a poet's gift of self. Poets are called not only to wonder, but to act. Oh, I love that. How is a poem a form of action? And what actions can any writer right now during this weird year take?
Thank you. So I feel that well, writing is work, right? We any those of us who are engaged in this, this calling, know that it's work, that it requires stepping away from other responsibilities, for a while, for some time, and other interactions. And so in a way that can feel very indulgent. I think a lot of us struggle with that. We feel like we're needed in so many places, and what is the best use of our time and our talents, and we don't want to let anybody down in any way.
Right.
And yet this act of writing, the work of writing, it requires a stepping back. And so it's almost like, if I think of like monks in a monastery, or nuns in a cloister convent, like they're stepping away from the world to do this reflective work and this prayer, that it's like taking it out of the world, but it's still this kind of almost, they're like, no, there's a concrete good that comes out of this. We're able to give something to the world through this act of, retreat and reflection and kind of prayer. And I think that when a writer, and I feel like that's what Paul Mariani was saying when he talked about wanting to become the kind of poet, who could write the things he could write, like later in his career. It's like wanting to become that person. And so I think that the act of writing, when it's done in a way that is selfless or other serving, we can send a message out into the world that helps people. Maybe it weaves hope into the world when the world needs that hope. Maybe it helps create empathy. So we're creating maybe, if you want to look at it in business terms, a product, but hopefully it's a gift that people can take and use to kind of keep alive the things that are worth living the best life for, living a good life, and having a good society, and working together for good ends. So I guess I feel like we're producing something. The act of writing is something that is healthy for society, for others, and can be a gift to others if we have the right, do the right work.
A gift that keeps giving too,
I
long
hope.
after we're gone. Yeah, it's true. And COVID hit right in the middle of a memoir class I was teaching, and it was a live class. And I teach adult students, and they were pretty bummed out. And I said, now's the time, because you're needed. You're needed. Your stories are needed. So I totally agree with what you said. I think that there's a myth that writing is either opening a vein, which I think Hemingway perpetrated, but it might have, they say Stephen King now, but I'm pretty sure it was Hemingway. Or it's like you just sit there and it comes, and you never have to do anything else to it. So I love your answer, and I think it's an act of giving as much as, I think it's anything but a selfless act. But being a mom, I know I used to meditate, and I still meditate, but I was meditating hard back then. And I would meditate. I was in a desert with nothing but wind and a tarp over my head. And that would just be so glorious. And then I could just write for an hour and it would just flow. So I get that. It made me feel like I had more to give my children, but it also made me feel guilty to take the time.
Yeah. The contrast, the paradox.
Paradox. So, do you, this segues right in. Do you think having family from New Orleans and living in Houston affects your phrasing, inflection, all that kind of, all the tools you use in poetry? And how does that area of the world, since you love place as much as me, inspire you and your work?
You know, I have never thought about whether, you know, the kind of the New Orleans background, you know, or the Texas background. I have both. To what extent they influence my phrasing and cadence. I know when I was maybe 4 years old, I had a New Orleans accent, you know, and then we moved to Texas after that, and I lost it. I love the New Orleans accent. I miss more of it. I love it. And when I think of like what I think of when I think of, you know, family gatherings or just visiting, you know, Louisiana, I think of, for me, it's like these are very like boisterous, people loving gatherings, and lots of laughter and you know, music, great storytelling, great food. So there's just something to me that's very communal and you know, like the love of people and the love of gathering and celebrating life. Those things, and the kind of of course, the art, the architecture, the weather, the air, all of that, it just is in my bones. But if I were to think of like something that I take away vocally and like in my phrasing, to me, it's like a big loud laugh, you know, and you know, and I get a little excited sometimes, and I can go, oh, you know.
I know, I'm the same.
That comes from my New Orleans family.
I get it. I've got the same. I totally get it. I'm pretty good at hiding it, but when I have a laugh, it's heard from here to the next county. So, so that's a wonderful answer, and I always ask because I have a very strange background. I lived in many different places, but my parents are were South Carolinians, always will be, and I know that people see that in my phrasing sometimes, but they're usually from a different area if they do. So it interests me. I always ask that, especially of poets. I don't see any difference.
I say y'all.
Wow. You know, that's the new thing to say because it's genderless.
Right.
And it's very in right now. I actually have seen posts about it. Probably by Southern people, but okay. It's inclusive. So I want to go back to your childhood for just a minute, because I think most writers who start out writing or have a desire to write and may be thwarted for a while have childhoods full of story. I loved reading about your first short story, The Difference. And before the show, I was saying, oh my gosh, that would just be an amazing story for now. Will you tell us about the characters now just a bit, or what their names were? Because I don't remember exactly, but they were just fascinating.
Thank you. That is the first thing that I remember writing was a story called The Difference. The Difference. And I created the first character. I want to say we were eating at a restaurant when I was a kid, and I drew a character on a napkin. He might have been a peanut. I think it was a peanut with legs, you know, kind of, you know, like Mr. Peanut. But I'm like 7, maybe at this time, 6 or 7 years old, probably like 6. And so I went home and I made more characters, and the Difference were like they were a group, you know, they hung out together, and they went and they were supposed to like go save people or do good things, you know, and I don't really remember any of their actual adventures, but I remember there was a holly, like a little sprig of holly. There was a letter D, and he was like a D with legs, you know. There was a rubber band named Flyer. There was a cherry. And then I think they're peanuts. So a lot of them were food, but I also had that letter D and the rubber band in there for some reason. And I remember the first few lines of the story. It was like, hi, Cherry. Hi, Holly. Where's Flyer and the rest of the group? That's all I remember. But they had all kinds of adventures, and it was fun.
Well, I love stories about childhood writing. And being a mom and a teacher, I realize it's a juggle for you to find the time to do your writing in the first place and to have the meticulous mindset and pen to revise. Can you tell us a little bit about your routine? And does it change?
Oh my gosh, routine is almost it's the opposite of what I have. It's I read this, maybe it was a book called Literary Mama or Writer Mama, I think Writer Mama, and she said, the author said, moms write in the nooks and crannies. I'm pretty sure that's where I read that. But they write in the nooks and crannies of time, wherever you have a little few minutes and you're not doing something else, you open up. For me, I do start things and do a little editing on my phone a lot. So if I were waiting with the kids at a doctor's appointment and they're just sitting there in the waiting room, I might be on my phone, but I'm creating something, and then I do sometimes work late into the night, super unhealthy, don't get enough sleep when I'm working on poems, but it's the quiet time. I'll create late at night sometimes. And there have been times when, we were, one poem was sort of inspired, or I guess I got some direction for a poem. We were doing a family movie night. We were watching Disney's Fantasia. And I thought, oh, what a great, something, got my imagination going. And I, kind of just made some notes. I jotted down some notes right then and there that I then later wove into a poem. And I don't know what I would have done without that, that family time. So I was kind of fusing the family time with the writing as well. And I've had my children help me too. I've had my students and my children, I'll say, what about this line? Do you hear this line? What is it saying to you? And I'm looking for a word here that does da 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 da. And they have helped me, think through some different options before. And it's really fun to do with them. And teaching them.
That's why I love children in general for that reason, because they say the wisest things. Mm-hmm. And I love teaching because it gives me such inspiration. It's a cyclical give and take. So I get it. Thank you. Do you have any advice for people who are very serious writers, but want to publish traditionally and have not done so yet?
Great question. I started very small. I really did. It was incremental, just like I think poems get built incrementally, or pieces of writing get built incrementally. And I think a writing career or just craftsmanship also gets built incrementally. So when something made me think one time that I need to do this now, or I'm never going to do it. I'm not ready, but I'll never be ready if I don't start somewhere. And so I started with haiku, and I found some different, at first I found just some kind of blogs that people had where they would take things and publish them, little small snippets, and started there, and got a couple of little tiny things published. And then I went to some of the haiku journals, and the first time I submitted to a haiku journal, I thought I was doing haiku, because I remembered like learning about haiku back in the, whatever school. And I got a rejection, which you get lots of those when you start trying to submit to journals. So you have to be ready for rejection as part of the process. But I got this rejection, and I remember it kind of had this vibe like no, that's not it. I don't remember how they worded it, but it was, no, that's not what we're going for. And I thought, what was I doing wrong? And so that made me go back and look more carefully and go, oh, okay. Maybe I was being way too obvious or just cliche or something. And so I went back and I started studying more. And then I started trying to submit. And I had a very, very generous editor of a haiku journal one time who gave me some pointed feedback that then helped me later to get published. And then I joined the Haiku Society of America, and I got paired with a mentor, and she worked with me a little to work, work on my craft even more. And then, so you find these like little ways to continue honing your craft, and then you increasingly try something that stretches what you've done before. And you say, okay, my next goal is I want to try to get in a print only journal. instead of online. So let me try some print only journals. And you have to be, how much do I have to spend? So, because there are little fees, so how can I be strategic about where I submit? And then you start to have favorite journals. I want to get into that journal. I really respect that journal. Let me try and soak in their writing for a while and see what they're publishing and get inspired by it and grow there. And then you get a group of other writers who can help give you feedback. I have the Houston Catholic Writers Society, and we meet and workshop each other's work, and that's been just hugely beneficial. So it's taking the steps and continuing to grow. Like, what isn't the next thing that I can do to become a better word crafter?
Yeah, that's what I would say. So word by word, bird by bird, as Anne Lamott would say, and you'll get there. I totally agree. I'm still striving to get there, but I've had a lot of accomplishments, and if I had given up when I was 21, 22, yeah. So just keep trying, everybody, if you have a desire to write. And another comment, I think haiku is the hardest thing to write in the whole world.
Yes.
So kudos to you.
I'm 30, so to cut it down, is a challenge. That's a great challenge to take on.
Yeah, it is. It is. I do it, but I'd never publish it. Nothing I do. No, it's one thing I wouldn't even try for. Okay. I think I would love to turn it to Kaylee one last time, and then we will talk about what's next for you and where people can find you. Thank you, Lesley. Kaylee, we have anything else?
Yes, we have one last question from Noelle Puglisi, and she says, poems come from a personal place. How does it feel for you when people can relate to your poetry?
Well, I mean, it's, poetry is, anything with words, it's really an attempt to connect, right? Our readers, sending it out into the world is an attempt to kind of share some experience with somebody else. So when a person reads and understands in some sense what I'm trying to do, and then adds their own experience to the poem and says, well, I saw this and it meant this to me. I mean, could there be anything better for a writer to experience that? But it's also, there's also that sort of, you feel a little trepidatious about sending your work out into the world too, because, it won't reach everybody. It won't mean the same thing to everybody. And so I guess it's such a gift. I think it's such a gift of, it's a generosity on the part of readers when they do connect with a writer's work, when they let them know, when they take time with somebody's writing and really look at what went into it. It's so it makes me feel very grateful to readers. So if you're here as a reader and you just love words and you love books, you're doing something very important. You're reading and you're taking it in and being part of that connection and making that work bigger because you've read it and now it's part of you too. You've digested it. Your act is very important as well, and I think it's a generous one.
Wonderful. I want to thank Tatiana and Noelle for their wonderful questions. They're so active, and thank them for their presence. And want to invite all of you who are listening and may just be watching, join in. It's so much fun. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Lesley. And
thank you.
What's next for you, and where can people find you and your work, both online and off? Do you have any events? I know there are places in Texas that are open. So.
Yeah, I've been kind of waiting to schedule something in person because I
understand.
Just what you have these things you want to do. So I haven't done anything yet in terms of an in-person event, but I will be. I'm always active with Catholic Literary Arts, and we have a bunch of events and workshops. We have some really amazing ones going on throughout the fall. It's on Thursday nights. And so I'll be, helping with those. And at some point, I'll probably do another reading. I'll have a book launch. And all of that is going to be at my website, which is lesleyklinton.com. And it's at Lesley Clinton.com. And I have, and I'm on social media. So I've been sort of growing, in Twitter, kind of like getting a little writers community and readers and whatnot. And so join me there. Make it fun, come give some interaction. And then Instagram, I'm trying to get a little more active on all those social media sites. And then I have a Facebook page as well. So come find me and chat with me, and I'd be delighted. And so I'll have things on the calendar there as they come up.
Okay, thank you. So I want to just make sure that most of your screen names are Lesley Clinton. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And all of my social media can be found through my website. So if you go to my website, you can click on them and it'll take you there.
Okay. So I want to close. Thank everybody for listening with my teabag wisdom. It's always right. You probably can read it, but I don't mean for people to read it. I show it to show that it's just not out of my head. You are unlimited. So Godspeed, Lesley. You've got lots that's going to happen.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you. Thank you. And to all of your viewers.
Well, thank you. It's been a
Kaylee,
pleasure.
well, Kaylee, thank you for everything too.
I know.
Thank you. It was a pleasure listening.
So Lesley told you where you can find her and her work. You can also find more about me and my work at either shoresofourSouls.com, including some of my stories and essays that were the ones that were both online and in print, my blogs, and also my coaching site at Ground One, O-N-E, not enumerated, ground1coaching.com. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy this beautiful weather that I think the whole country's having except for the Gulf. And my prayers and thoughts go to everybody there. What a summer and autumn this has been. And this is Kathy Ramsperger from shoresofourSouls.com signing off and bidding you a great week with a good book to read. Thank you, Lesley. Bye.
Bye.